Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Live. This evening, we have Sweta Vikram, and I am so excited to have her, even if it's still in the virtual realm. We've met through social media, and I'm so excited to be able to hear her voice and share space with her. I'm going to start off with a poem tonight, and I don't usually read any of my own work. This one was important to me because of the layers of gratitudes and things that happened recently in my own life, being able to be present with people with some pretty big changes in their lives recently, and Robert's help with different things, just a lot of gratitude. And Sweta being here with us really inspired me to read this one about gratitude. It's titled The Distance Between Rings. And it was published by Vox Populi, Michael Sims, online. The distance between rings. How perfectly I feel the noose of longing. Were I able to quiet this mind and walk into myself for 1,000 miles, perhaps I would arrive at the other side of loneliness. Those who call offer dead words when I need lightning rods in a summer storm. Day or night, this body wants light before it no longer sings, always. Come, let us sit under our words, a many-ringed tree, bodies drunk on lost time, listening to delicate leaves rustling. How large this day is, as if it had room for happiness, possibility, two, together, slowly annihilated by gratitude. Let's see if I need, there we go.
So beautiful.
Thank you. So everybody, I am just thrilled to introduce Sweta Srivastava Vikram. I'm sorry if I did not pronounce that quite right. I did practice though. Is an international speaker, best-selling author of 12 books, an Ayurveda and mindset coach who is committed to helping people thrive on their own terms. As a trusted source on health and wellness, most recently appearing on NBC and Radio Life Force, Sweta has dedicated her career to writing about and teaching a more holistic approach to creativity, productivity, health, and nutrition. Her work has appeared in the New York Times and other publications across 9 countries on 3 continents. Sweta is a trained yogi and certified Ayurvedic health coach and is on the board of the Fly Female Founders, which I'd like to hear more about, and holds a Master in Strategic Communications from Columbia University, voted as one of the most influential Asians of our times, and winner of the Voices of the Year Award. Past recipients include Chelsea Clinton. She lives in New York City with her husband and works with clients across the globe. She also teaches yoga, meditation, and mindfulness to survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence, as well as incarcerated men and women. Find her on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Welcome, Sweta. Welcome. Let's up here. We start out, as I warned you, with the question about an influential book from your youth.
So firstly, thank you so much for having me. And I have to ask you this. How do you pronounce your name? Because I've had 2 pronunciations in my head, and I'm like, I'd much rather ask you.
Juniper.
Juniper. Okay. That was my first choice as well. Juniper, thank you so much for putting all of this together. I think this sense of community and connection has been so crucial to our emotional well-being during the pandemic. So I really appreciate being a part of this community and being here this evening. I have to say, like Jane Austen, her works were, they just blew me away. And so I have to give you a little bit of background. I was born in India, but raised between India and North Africa, and then moved to the States like 20 years ago. So I've lived across 3 continents with extremely different cultures. And when I would read her work, like I could imagine these women whom I saw a few of them in my world, but I largely didn't see them. And it was just her imagination. Like when you think, I'm like, to be able to create a world that didn't exist, but she could envision that world. I didn't know as a little girl or as a teenager what feminism meant. I didn't know what being a woman's ally meant, but those values really resonated with me. And till date, like Pride and Prejudice, oh my God, that book, there's so many versions of the movie have been made. All of that is great. But like when you sit with that book, and it's just such solid writing, such profound characters, and sorry, it just placing women in a space that we didn't know exists. To me, that's incredible creativity, to create space in society that didn't really exist. So yeah, I have to say Jane Austen's work, especially Pride and Prejudice. And also on the other hand, I had Nancy Drew. I was like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to grow up to be a detective. So I also have that. Not going to lie. Um,
Wonderful. Yes, yes. Would you say that Jane's work influenced some of your fiction novels?
I'm not so sure in terms of writing as much because times have changed, but I think thank you, Robert. She is great, right? I love how she created that space. I think in many ways she gave women permission that society hadn't, that you could
Yes.
go ahead and be forthright or be opinionated, and you might be judged for it, but there is a space for women who want to share their opinions. So it's I'm like grateful to women authors like her who created this space. When like people like us started to write, it was like it's not unheard of. There are women who use their opinions. I
Mhm.
mean, so I think that was very influential. I think she made this mindset shift for a lot of authors.
Mhm. Yes.
Things that seemed unattainable, she made them accessible. And I don't know whether she was even thinking of that. Maybe she was trying to create an alternate reality for her mental well-being. Who knows, right? Those were tough times. Women
Yes.
had to use pseudonyms and write under like a pen name, which was a male writer. I mean, couldn't have been easy.
No.
So and that's why they say, when you get to a certain space, open the door for others, let
Mm.
others come in so they can open the doors for others. If she had
Yes.
just held that space for herself, I, me, myself, so many
Mhm.
of us wouldn't be here today because we would still be exploring where women belong. I
Mhm.
think, which was really incredible.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that generous answer. And I wanted to add, as part of the bio, that Sveta is also known as the keeper of secrets and problems, a comedian, and a perpetual advocate. And I've been connected with her through mainly Instagram. We're recently on Facebook, but I continually in her work and continually in your posts, and even what you were just talking about, you're constantly lifting other people up. And I'm just so grateful for what you're modeling for the different women and people. And I came across the brevity article that you had, and it was about it wasn't centered in your knowledge. You gave some examples of your own, but you lifted up a few other women writers and solicited theirs. And you had the opportunity to just focus on all of your experience, this vastness and this knowledge, but you gave a little bit and you deferred to other women. And I wanted to acknowledge that and say thank you. And I'll be quiet about it now, but I think it's a really important factor of who you are. And I don't know that you would um, maybe toot that horn as loud as I just did. So, yes.
You just made my day. Thank you so much, Jennifer. That really does mean a lot, and I would like to believe. I think it goes back to the whole mindfulness aspect, and I want to talk about mindfulness, creativity, all of that. But like just mindfulness in our own existence and awareness. There's two ways to approach life. I have nothing, or I have enough and I can share. And how do you define those parameters of enough? For someone, $1 billion home wouldn't be enough. And for someone, just being able to provide a good, healthy life for the family would be enough. And I like to work from that growth mindset space because ultimately that also lowers your anxiety and it's better for your own health. If I was always intense about I, me, myself, like see how my body language changes versus I have this and I can share with others, all of a sudden I am breathing better. And I'd like to believe like life is a big pie. There is a sliver of that yummy pecan pie for each one of us, right? none of us need the whole thing. We're going to
Mhm.
give ourselves a disease. But if we
Yeah.
share it, the others also, I want to believe that most people are kind and generous, right? So they pay it forward and we open more opportunities. And especially as women, I mean, we know, and this is not the place for that conversation perhaps, but the reality is we need to help each other to bring ourselves up. We need to
Mhm.
hold our hands. We need to have each other's backs. And
Yes.
if you are in a place where you can do that for others, why not? And I also believe what is yours will always be yours. So
Yes.
if a story I get to amplify other writers' voices, I won't lose out on readers.
Mhm.
They might find new readers, and I'm very happy with that, because if you have faith in who you are, your people find you.
Yes.
Not everyone will sort of resonate. My thinking might not resonate with everyone, and that's fine. I don't have to be for everyone, and this is not coming from a place of snobbery, not at all. Like, there is
Mhm.
no pressure, but I have my people, and people will come and go. You need to be rooted in who you are, so that you're not dependent on the
Mhm.
external entry and exits of
Mhm.
life and circumstances and things that way. I think that just creates a more holistic approach to how you approach creativity, how you approach relationship or work, when you walk in with an abundance mindset, like there is enough. And if we
Yeah.
all do this together, also in terms of writing, right? I mean, I wish artists and writers were paid more. But if I just keep saying, this is for me, I've got this opportunity, I'm not going to talk about it, how do we raise the demand for a profession?
Mhm.
It's
Yes.
simple things and big things why the
Mhm.
growth mindset helps. And like, really, it makes such a huge impact on our own well-being, when
Mhm.
you're not just hoarding all the time. There is, when
Yes.
we lift others, we also lift ourselves up. It's better for our mental health, emotional well-being. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Yes. And it's so counter to our American culture, the competitive market, the competitive, for grades, the competitive on the basketball court when you're in high school and at the college. Sharing growth mindset with my students was really
Mm.
interesting in that sense, because it was just a concept. But when I introduced videos that brought it into the sports arena and some of those other ones that they could always already relate to, even the avenue in took some competitive, connection to get it opened up in the idea. But it's the modeling of it. I mean, you're consistently modeling it and sharing it in that way. And I want to ask about the Fly female founders. Is this an okay time?
Oh yeah, oh absolutely, and feel free
Okay.
to about any time. So this is a New York based organization. We started it, I want to say, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I might be off by a year. And it was women in business. We wanted to create a space where they could network. I personally am not a night owl, and networking events don't work for me because they're not intimate enough. I like deep meaningful relationships, otherwise personally it doesn't work for me. So we wanted to create that space where women in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s starting a business, age wasn't a factor. How do you educate yourself, right? Like, so we bring in speakers, we have network, even in the pandemic we're doing like networking, like March 25th. I'll send you a link to it. We have like these networking sessions, and people have actually made connections, found clients. So it's, again, supporting other women business owners, because being a solopreneur can be very lonely, and especially during COVID, where you if you work for a company, you still, or work for a college, you're dealing with your students. But if you work for yourself, you are literally by yourself in your silos. So this way, at least, we're creating an opportunity for women to network, to educate themselves, and find that safe space where ageism is real. And we
Mhm.
want to, it's not that that's the core focus, but we want to highlight that, because a large part of our community are not women in their 20s. It includes women in their 20s, but it's also women, 30 and older, 40 and older, because 50 and older, because there shouldn't be an age limit to dreams. So
Yes.
yeah, so it's really cool. Like on Tuesday we're bringing an event to our community. It's all about productivity tips and tools,
Mhm.
and who doesn't need those? And most of these events an hour and a half. Then we have like some afternoon workshops, so we have like variety of
Mhm.
events. And even during the pandemic they've been pretty successful, because people mankind, right? We are looking for meaningful connection. I think when the pandemic just started, we all went on a binge of connecting with somebody we went to kindergarten with, right? Because I'm like, oh, I'm going to die. I either need to be face down in pecan pie and just connect with everybody that I knew since the time I was a toddler.
Yes.
And then, 2-3 weeks later, it got exhausting. Neither can you be face down in pecan pie, speaking from experience,
Yeah.
nor can you do 50 Zoom calls a week. The mindfulness aspects comes in. So I think Fly Female Founders has been great in that it's very discerning, it's quality information, and there's a safe space. And women are very unapologetically honest about their triumphs and their struggles. So it's like real stories, real women, and you make these connections, you find a client. So yeah, that's what it is about.
Thank you for explaining it. Yes. So would you like to read something at this point or talk about one of your projects?
Sure. So I would like to read a poem or two, if that's okay. So
That would be
this is
wonderful.
my book, Saris and a Single Malt, and that's my mom on the cover of the book. And I wanted to, I want to read from this, but I just wanted to, this is my novel, Louisiana Cat. The reason I have both of these is because people ask me, um, how much time is good time? Like they get all mathematical about creativity in terms of how much time is good amount of time spent on a project, or like how many years should you be spending, or months or weeks on a project for it to be qualified under a good book. And I always say this: with Saris and a Single Malt, my mom died very suddenly and I didn't get to say a goodbye, so I wrote this book under grief inside of a week. I tried editing it, nothing happened. I tried adding poems, nothing happened. So from the time we got the call she was unwell to the time we did her last rites, that's when the book happened. Versus Louisiana Catch, it took me 6 to 7 years. And one could argue that's a novel, this is a book of poetry, but it wasn't that. Books have a mind of their own. And it's like, how kids have a mind of their own. I have like a 3.5-year-old niece, and she told us all the other day, I need space. I was like, awesome, but wow. So books are pretty much that way, they tell us they have a mind of theirs. So if to anyone who is tuned in right now, just remember, just show up to your work. Whatever is your discipline, whatever is your dedication, I'm not here to tell you that write every day, though that would be great, or write once a week. You figure out what works for you, but make that a routine. Make that non-negotiable. Unless there's SOS happening, even then, if there's another point of contact, let them handle it. But for the most part, like just make that non-negotiable, because when you start to respect your creativity respects you. If it's just a side gig, it always remains a side gig. And by side gig, I'm not saying it has to be your full-time thing. I mean, in terms of respect, like it's something that I do when I'm not doing something else. No. It's something that I do even when I'm doing everything else. Like, so that mindset shift is very important. Said I wanted to write this poem because, we got the call and we were at the airport, and I had this feeling that I wasn't going to see her. And I'd spoken with her 3 days ago, and my parents were going away on vacation. And, up until then, I had never thought of mortality. And that changed my writing too, right? Mortality to me was grandparents. It was a generation above my parents. So I felt very safe. So I felt safe in my writing as well. See, everything is connected. So I would explore, but then not hit a wall, but have like create a wall. I didn't want to explore further because I hadn't needed to be that vulnerable, right? So
Yeah.
that mindset shift happened. So here I am. We knew she'd had a heart attack right before my parents were supposed to catch this flight. So I wrote this poem in the airplane, and it's titled Wait for Me. I walk inside your heart, my empty palms suture the leaks in your valves so you don't drown. I read you passages from our unwritten lives, convince you to fight harder so I don't grieve for you already. The flight is set for takeoff. Don't ask me to keep the faith because the sky looks empty. And my mom, every time that we would be, thank you, stressed or anything, the whole thing was keep the faith. And in that moment, I'm like, what are you talking about? where is God, where is faith? And this is me mumbling to my notebook, to my iPad where I was writing. Like, and I think this was the book that came out in 2016, and yoga had been a big part of my life, but it was a very selfish relationship in that I would show up to the mat, lower my stress, someone compliment, your skin looks good. I was like, ooh, yoga is working. So it was very selfish. I would show up to yoga when I needed it, but I wasn't living the yogic life. And when I say the yogic life, it's not about living inside a cave and like, deriding people who want to eat meat or drink. It was none of that. It was just being aware. And like gratitude being ingrained in every breath you take. It wasn't that. Like gratitude for me was when I got my bonus or when we went on vacation. And so I wasn't a brat. I was like a lot of other people, just expressing gratitude when there were moments to be defined. And then when I started to seek answers, one of my editors and my publisher both were like, your writing is changing. And I'm like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? They were like, no, 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 no. It's a good thing because we feel the space. I said, because I am also exploring. So I would never say losing a loved one is a good thing, because it's not. But every bad situation gives us an opportunity to grow, right? And it's either you're Icarus, or you like completely under the ground, or you find that space like, these are the cards I've been dealt, you know, what can I do and what's the purpose? So that was the yoga philosophy that got me thinking, what was the purpose? um, my mom's death, how did that influence my writing? And I think
Yes.
it became like, so it was very much about, and she was that one woman who would cook for the community. Like, family was everything. And we would get into arguments because I have voice and my mom was like, like she didn't want to hurt others. And not that I would do that either, but her whole thing would just do it. And I would always tell her, we are not samosa and pizza. It's not a job to keep others happy. Take care of yourselves. You're not
Yeah.
responsible for other people's happiness. Make sure you're not hurting them. That is good enough. So we obviously had our differences, but I think in exploring my relationship after she died, I started to explore writing and yoga from a very different perspective. And I think and I started to see the correlation between writing and yoga. It's like Pavlov's dog, that experiment when he would ring the bell and eventually the dog started to salivate. My body, even when on days I didn't want to write, we all have those days, or I didn't want to like be on the mat, I would show up. And my body knew how to practice asanas and my mind knew how to write. So it enhanced my productivity. So the new project, that the book that comes out this year, this is my 13th book inside of 11 years or 12 years. And I see the difference that yoga has made. It's not I am special, it's how it just allows you to channelize your emotions, your rejections, because you're not personalizing. One of the things that you learn is don't be attached to the outcome. And as
Yes.
artists and writers, we love to play victims. They rejected me. And I'm like, I'm not giving that power to anyone, right? Like, it's not personal. And it's important
Yes.
to know that, because it can really mess around with your mental health when you think everyone is out to get you. Like every rejection, and I would go to writing retreats and I would see my friends and my colleagues, every rejection was directly proportional to a bottle of wine. And I'm like, enjoy your wine when you want to enjoy wine. Like, your wine is not going to help you get your book somewhere or a poem somewhere, right? So
Yeah.
have like the mindfulness again, enjoy things when you're going to enjoy them. um, so the new book that comes out this year it's called A Piece of Peace. A piece meaning, I keep talking about pie, so I mean that piece,
Yes.
of peace as in Zen. And I went through some really devastating health issues. So I write about that. Like, I had lost everything. I couldn't walk for months. I lost my clients, everything. And then I had to build my life and my body back at the same time. and, and I would keep going back to that one thing: do not be attached to the outcome. Keep trying. Doesn't mean you'll write again, doesn't mean you'll walk again, but you can't give up the faith either. That's what my mom's saying: keep the faith.
Yes.
um so I'm
That
very
that is
excited.
such
Sorry.
time. No, that's okay. That was about the time that I became aware of you. Is like I think you were just not quite on the other side of
Mm,
starting to get better, and so I've
okay.
seen you like skyrocket, from there with all of this wonderful work. And I have with what you were saying, that you've covered a lot of ground there, which is great. But I'm wondering about that generation because I lost my dad last
Sorry.
April after the pandemic started. Thank you. And so there's not that generation, above us now.
Right.
There's that, and there's also, I think, coming into even greater our body and our force and our mindfulness and our voices on the page. I think that there's that also, at least for me. So I was wondering if that was part of it for you. You said your voice was shifting, and I was wondering how if there was something you could point to. Was it that lack of generation, and we are the next generation to um, cross over, pass on, whatever we believe in or decide? Is it coming into yourself in greater voice? Is it being centered more in mindfulness? Is it all of us and pecan pie?
I
Where does
would
that
say,
place
Juniper,
you?
so I would think I love that question. It's so deep and it makes so much sense. I would say it was a combination of everything. I think losing my mom so suddenly also made me realize life is very precious and it happens when you're planning it. Like her bags were packed, they were headed to the airport and she fell sick.
Yeah.
No signs of anything else, right? So, I think that realization that I think most of us take life for granted. And that's what happened when the pandemic hit. We'd taken so much of so many things and people, opportunities, relationships for granted. We just assumed they were going to be there. So I
Mhm.
think that shifted. Also, I think I felt like I grew 40 years older because all of a sudden I became a parent to my dad.
Mhm.
And this is nothing against the men in the room here, but it's just like my mom would always say, women are the connective tissue. They keep relationships together, and at least I've seen that in our friend circle amongst our family. So I felt like I had to step up.
Mhm.
So it's losing her, finding my voice, uh, becoming in for the initial few months, becoming almost like a parent to
Yeah.
my dad, and then trying to figure out where do I fit in this new role. Like I became the gatekeeper.
Mhm.
Like I wanted her legacy to be preserved. I wanted her memories to be preserved. And then, when the wake and all of those things happen, people come in and
Mhm.
everyone has their own ideas. And I was like, my mom would not like this, but how do I say this the right way where I'm not hurting people? But my goal is to preserve her legacy. So I think
Mhm.
I just grew old by 40 years. I literally, that's how I feel. So I think it also brought along a lot of there were struggles because part of me was this 30-year-old who wanted to be out somewhere, and the other part of me was this 80-year-old who was somewhere else, right? So I had to, and I think yoga and mindfulness helped me bridge that gap, and so did writing. Like, so it was also pushing the boundaries a little bit. So it's the space was created. It was also like, if not now, when? And
Mhm.
we have to tell stories to heal. And
Yes.
I'm a big believer everyone has trauma. Some people don't recognize that they've
Mhm.
had trauma. Some people do recognize that. But for those who do, and if we take action, at least we're not pouring our broken selves into the world, because an open wound will attract other things that we don't really need.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And I mean, some of the most intense writing, whether it's Federico Garcia Lorca and talking about Duende and the energy and the words coming from the edge of the wound, or however he so artfully says it, but at the same time, it's what tears families apart. Some of those things that aren't addressed mindfully. Absolutely. We there's a question that we have from the audience, and then I would like you to read something else.
sure.
But if you don't mind, we go to the question first. What was the impetus for your novel? I would like to hear some of it if you care to share. So this is Louisiana Catch.
Okay, sure. I think we're thinking along the same lines. That was one thing I did want to share. So I think there were a few reasons. When I would go into a bookstore, I couldn't find books about women like myself. So so how do I say that? So like a lot of the South Asian writing were done by Indian Americans, and I'm first generation, I'm not second generation. So second generation, they're Americans. Their idea of India is the stories they've heard from their parents. So they're talking about a generation I couldn't relate to. You know, when they talked about like they came here, and like one of my husband's aunt, they lived in Detroit, and she was like they had to drive up to Canada to buy Indian grocery. When we came here, it wasn't because there weren't opportunities back in India. We just, the generation had changed, right? It was like, I wanted to go to school, you know, we wanted to travel more. So it wasn't because there were no opportunities back, there were opportunities, and we just wanted different things from life. So I was like, I don't see that. You're either victimizing women or then they don't exist. What about modern, educated, professional, working Indian women? Where are they in the books? Like, why do they have to suffer in a sari, cry about some fish curry? Like, there's a restaurant, Indian restaurant down the block from wherever you live. Like, you know, if that's how nostalgic you are. So, I think I couldn't find myself. And I think maybe Toni Morrison said that, right? Like, if you can't find a book that you want to read, like I'm paraphrasing, then just write it, something along those lines. The other thing is I work with survivors, which is survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. I teach yoga to them. And I found there were so many misconceptions and judgment. And Ahana, the female protagonist, is a sexual assault survivor in this book. And I wanted to bring that story to light, that no matter how educated you are, how wealthy you are, how privileged you are, or how poor and uneducated you are, this is a heinous crime that exists across all cultures. It's not limited to, unfortunately, right? And people have made their minds like, oh, why couldn't she walk out? It's like, do you understand that mindset? You know, you are in a place of privilege where you say you won't be. I can't imagine people choose to be. Imagine how brainwashed and fearful do you have to be. So I also wanted to highlight like this problem really exists in a society, but how do women overcome that? So this is a woman who goes from being a sexual assault survivor to running the largest feminist conference in New Orleans. So it's a multicultural book. So yeah, that was the reason, two big reasons why I wanted to write the book.
Sounds great.
So do you want me to read from the book or the other book that I brought?
Whatever you choose, Sweta. What would you like?
So, you know, I want to stay true to the philosophy of supporting other people. And I think I want to read something. So this book is called How Yoga Works. And I know it sounds very clinical and very nerdy and very yogish, but it's not that. I highly recommend this book in your library, and like treat it like pecan pie, not face down inside a 12-inch pie on a given day, a sliver every day, because it's, you can reread this. So I'll read something and you'll know what I'm talking about. Okay. The images he's talking about are all the painful things that bad seeds will make you see. These things will hurt you unless you can stop them first. I mean, you can either stop a bad thing before it happens, or you can stop the rest or the future of a bad thing that is already happening. Something like your bad back, if you can get at the bad seeds already planted in your mind. And this is what the master calls the antidote, a very clear series of concrete steps found throughout the ancient books, steps that you can sit down and work on to stop bad seeds before they go off. Now, here are the steps you have to go through. There are 4, and the master begins the first one by saying, the images, people who hurt me or the like, come from what I did myself, or got others to do for me, or what I was glad to hear others had done. The point is that the first step, excuse me, in going into your own mind and destroying bad seeds that you know are there is to go back to the basics. Go over what you planted by mistake and how you planted it. And that means, first of all, really recognizing that you did something to plant a seed. Here, before anything else, the master wants to remind us that there are ways of planting a seed, either good or bad. So out of context, it might feel a little disjointed, but what the whole idea is, you know, the good the good and the bad, right? So when we wonder about, and what this book addresses is, when we wonder, well, why is this happening to me? It also goes, it reminds you, it's a reflection of the good and the bad we do, right? And sometimes we might not like deliberately hurt someone, but even when someone is hurt and we find joy in that, we are planting bad seeds that end up hurting us. So what I like is it's really mindful and very proactive in taking those steps. We all have arch enemies and we all have those people like meh, but being the bigger person is being detached. You don't have to be happy. I don't believe when someone slaps you, you should offer them your other cheek, but you don't have to spit either. And I think that's what I like about this. So every time that
Mhm.
I feel stuck, I go back like, how was I with people this week? What could I have done differently?
Mhm.
Because you can't change people.
Mhm.
The only thing you can work on is on
Mhm.
yourself, right? And the only thing you can control are your thoughts. Because if our thoughts are in place, it directly impacts our creativity. Either we can be locked up in a room wondering why someone this did this to me or whatever have you, or use that time to create something beautiful. So I really highly, highly, highly recommend this book. It's something like I call it's almost like a Gita or a Bible or a Quran that you can keep by your
Yes.
bedside. Yeah, and yeah, desk, and like just read a chapter a day. If you read more than a chapter, it gets too much. You really want to like savor it.
Mhm.
And it really gets you to think about perspectives, and that's so relevant in today's world, the political world that we live in, or even the creative world, right? Where the yoga teacher is talking about like the one of the students, she shows him a pen. He's like, what is it? And she's like, what is this? And he's like, oh, this is a pen. And then she throws the pen at the cow, and the cow starts to eat it. So she was like, to the cow, it's not a pen, it's something edible, hay or whatever, grass, but to you it is a pen. So in life,
Mhm.
this perspective, we can't always see the world from our perspective. We have to create space for
Mhm.
other people's viewpoint too. And I feel like that really helps us write better characters, right? Like if we only
Mhm.
write people who are like us, it's going to get boring after a while. If we only write about, so for
Mhm.
me in this book, and I think Robert, you might appreciate this. So the villain, the antagonist in this book, his name is Jay. And I had to shower so many times when I was writing this antagonist because he's so creepy. So creepy.
Mhm.
This person would not be in my personal circle. I would make sure people in my personal circle were not friends with a person like this because he is just that dubious. But
Mhm.
can we really be true to our creativity if we just create us? How do I grow if I only work with familiarity? So I
Yes.
had to figure out a way. I had to meditate harder,
Mhm.
go for more workouts, dance, whatever have you, take extra showers and say, you off you go, Jay, off you go. Because he is like that slithery character. But he
Mhm.
pushed me, and that's why the book took the time that it took. It pushed me to get to that next level of my writing. When I
Yes.
wasn't afraid to write a character that I wouldn't befriend in personal life.
Mhm. And it made me think about those rules of creativity, what fuels your creativity that you talked
Mhm.
about. The book that you were just reading from is the part that you floss your mind,
Right.
meditate, floss your mind. That would be part of the flossing, but also surrounding yourself with good people. But to have that success, you need to, fuel, refuel, take care of yourself, surround yourself with good people, all those things that you say. Um, and to be able to see the differences between the people, you also need that centeredness and grounding to be able to see
Right.
the difference of where you're moving through the world and I'm moving through the world. And I might need a little bit more space today, or you might need, a shoulder to lean on today. It's
Right.
all of that is entwined and feeds our creativity, right? Because if we're not getting
Absolutely.
that shoulder to lean on, or if we're not getting that extra space, or that flossing of our meditating, or the reading a lot, I wrote down all of the tips that you gave. Um, we are not able to be grounded and create and have the space to create. And so when
Absolutely.
when we talked about before about how these things connect, everything connects back to the creativity. And even that creepy person that you're creating, and the difference between who you are and who you want to create, is so important, that gap to expand it and contract it. So
I love how you encapsulated the whole thing. And even with Ahana, who's the female protagonist in this book, people often ask me, is this your story? I was like, no, it isn't. I
yes.
work with sexual assault survivors. And that's the other thing I realized. Like, you don't have to be a survivor to help survivors. Like, it's not my people. It has people need people. However
Mhm.
you can help with the right intention, just show up. And I'm like, again, with Ahana, her, she has she loves her fitness and wellness, and so that's the bit we had in common. But I was like, as a personality, there were enough times that I was like, girl, don't do this. And I was like, okay, now I know I've written a character who's really not like me. But it was, again, creating women who aren't like us. Otherwise, where is the growth? Where is the growth
Mhm.
if we and it's a fine line, right? It's so important to surround us. Like, I think Jim Rohn said it, we are the sum total of the 5 people we talk the most to. But
Mhm.
again, if we only talk to people who are going to resonate with us on every single level, it's like an echo. Where is
Mhm.
the growth? We need someone to nudge us a little bit, someone to tell us, you know what, no, maybe there's another path. And it's not supposed to be comfortable, but
Yes.
growth comes from discomfort. And
Mhm.
that's where the creativity, like true creativity, comes from that place of discomfort where you're exploring it. But we physically don't have to be uncomfortable. And that's something I hadn't thought about, but I would like to share. Like, every time I go to a writing residency and we talk about this, that there are these stereotypes around writers and artists. You need to eat like this, you need to live like this, you need to do this.
Yes.
um and in living those stereotypes, so many people I know, they don't live up to their creativity because they're
Mhm.
so busy just living up to the stereotype of being a writer. And we've seen
Yes.
that with movie stars too, right? Like, this is what a star looks like. If you have no movies, you're not a movie star.
Mhm. Yes.
So treat it
Mhm.
like any other profession. Like, if you had a day job, would you drink till 4 in the morning and then show up at 11? You wouldn't, right? So why, if you don't respect your profession, why would somebody else?
Mhm. And when I said that I had sent messages and was talking with all the women about, it was primarily women, about coming tonight, one of them said that they're so grateful that there's somebody like you changing the idea of what a writer looks like. You're
Oh,
based
thank
in
you.
Ayurveda, you're based in mindfulness, you're not an alcoholic with a cigarette hanging out of your mouth, you're face down in the pecan pie 24/7 kind of idea. So I wanted to acknowledge that and pass it on. I don't think
Thank
that she
you.
was able to make it. The other piece is that difference and that push pull. I go back to William Blake and his contrarieties and the woe and joy and light and dark. And I believe it's the difference between those two that kind of push us through life. Like, it
Mm,
generates this energy and it helps us forward, not just create characters, not just generate the energy for creativity, but it's actually what sees us through that grief, is that difference between the joy and the woe, or the light and the dark.
I love
And
that.
you were saying it, but I wanted to add the perspective of William Blake in that piece. So
I
yeah.
appreciate it. And I think there's another thing that very often, especially with rejections, it's we are sensitive as creatives, we are sensitive, but like that, having that healthy detachment is so necessary. But because you know what? No one got the memo that you wanted to be a writer.
Mhm.
It's a gift and a privilege to be a writer, but
Mhm.
people don't owe you anything,
Mhm.
right? Like, so accept it. Like, don't get into this profession with a sense of entitlement. And also just knowing that everything is temporary. The only constant is change. So just
Yes.
showing up, you can't get one rejection and then say, I am done,
Mhm.
right? Again, because no one promised just because you write, you'll become an author. And just
Yes.
because you're an author doesn't mean you're a good writer. So I think people get too much into labels instead of just focusing on the art of creativity.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah, wonderful point. So do you have something else to read from us, whether it's from your novel or the book about your mom, or what,
Um,
something?
I guess the novel might take a little longer, and I want to be respectful of the time.
Mhm.
Um, okay. So this is a poem. from the same book, Saris and a Single Malt. It's called I Write. I write your name on my lips over and over again. Mother, mom, mama, ma. This grief isn't supposed to be mine. This story doesn't belong to me. I scrub the house clean, scrape the insides of many bowls, make chutney out of mint and cilantro, run a load of dirty laundry. But nothing washes away images of you tied to tubes in the hospital. I press my palms to my lips. I don't want to own this poem. I don't want to own this poem. But loss has a mind of its own. To survive, I must write.
Beautiful, beautiful poem.
Thank you. And I think writing for so many of us is how we navigate the world, right? And that's another reason thank you, Carmel. I wanted to share that poem because even during the pandemic, a lot of people were like, oh, now is the time to work on your novel. And I was like, when the world outside, the alternate, in a novel, you create alternate reality. I said, when life feels like such a cruel tease, how do I create an alternate reality? I just don't have it in me. But being able to write essays on mindfulness and Ayurveda felt like I was helping others. So also as writers, I just wanted to share this simple tip that don't limit yourself to the labels. I am a fiction writer. I am a poet. You know what? Every story inside you will pick a vessel. Sometimes it'll come out in the form of a poem, an essay, a short story, a book. Just be open to the idea of receiving and giving. That's extremely important in life and in creativity. Just be open. If you keep thinking, I just write novels, and that's when writer's block happens. Okay, fiction isn't happening. Let me see if something else happens. So yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Wonderful. When you start writing, do you have a feeling of what direction it might go? My multi-genre guests, I usually ask this, at what point do you know? Is it after it's on the page? Does it have a form, or is it?
So with poetry, I do. And all my poetry books, I have written them inside of a month. So it's very intense writing, like very, very deep core. But with my novels, they spread over a period of time. So I do have an idea. I'm a planner. I have a corporate background. So I need things in my calendar and I like deadlines. Like the free flowing doesn't, for me, when I say free flowing, my creativity cringes. It's like, no, girl, give me a deadline. But so I have that. But again, I'm open to the idea. So like there's one scene, so Ahana in Louisiana Catch, her mom dies. And my editor was like, that scene doesn't feel very real. And lo and behold, my mom died. And then, so I visited that emotional moment of loss and wrote from that place. So had I been rigid about this is how I write, because I was being very clinical about what a mother-daughter loss in a relationship from my research looked like. But here it was a personal experience. So it's not the same story, but I could tap into those emotions. So the emotional aspect, I leave a lot of room. And I think there comes a point with the novel, at least, where I feel the characters start to write themselves. Like, it's like, no, Ahana won't do that. Rohan won't do that. Jay would do that. So I think just leaving that space lets the characters grow and they become like your invisible friends, which is kind of creepy in social situations.
Yes. Okay. We have about 7 minutes. So I don't know if you want to read and it can go after a couple of minutes. So whether it's a poem or two, whether it's a section from the novel, whether it's telling us about a project that you're really excited about coming up, you have options here. Yes, we've had options all of the rest of our hour. But what would you like to? How would you like to spend the last few minutes here?
So let me see if I can read something from the novel. And some of the people I know who are from New Delhi, they were like, you're berating the city. I'm like, it's a novel, people, get over it. So, and this is a first person voice. And like I said, the female protagonist, her name is Ahana Chopra. My name is Ahana Chopra, and I was born and raised in the most ludicrous city in the world, New Delhi. Sometimes I feel Delhi doesn't understand me. Other times, I don't understand it. I don't think I've ever found a way to bridge the differences between what I was and what I was expected to be in this city. In Delhi, you find the majority running away from something, stashing away some secret but pretending to be happy. In Delhi, you always need to be on your guard. 30 minutes ago, when I was out for an evening run close to my office, a group of men sitting on their motorbikes and sipping tea in small glasses started whistling and making loud kissing noises. I covered my chest with my arms and looked around. The streets weren't empty, but harassers in New Delhi fear no one, neither the police nor the pedestrians. Two of the men got down from the bikes and started to walk around me. I moved away from them and scoped out a different route mentally. I could taste bile in my mouth. My running route and routine represented a small zone of freedom for me, and I could feel it being stolen away. I pushed my glasses closer to my face and noticed a small path across the street where no automobile could enter. I didn't think when I sprinted through the moving traffic, with the cars honking, people rolling down the windows and cussing at me. I fell down a couple of times and bruised my skin, but I got up, wiped myself off. I ran until I couldn't see the harassers. So,
Thank you.
yes. So yeah, this you're most welcome. So I wanted to read the beginning of this novel, and the tone changes because she is another thing that I wanted to address was when we think sexual assault, right? We are thinking women getting raped in strange places.
Mhm.
But we are warned about stranger danger, but we aren't warned about when the danger is at home. That was another thing that I realized, right? So you're told don't drink it, which is all great. But what if you're in an abusive relationship? And both India and the United States, the numbers are just growing with sexual assault within intimate relationships. Intimate partner violence has just gone up. So that's another thing that I wanted to address in this book. And so Ahana is a marital rape survivor. So she's from that 1%, 2%, noirish niche, people, the New Delhi population, right? Like the Upper East Siders. That would be the equivalent. So you think of it, this is a kid who's gone to Europe, traveled all over the world, got like an MBA and is an investment banker, all of that. And she's married to her college sweetheart, and he rapes her, and she cannot do anything about it. Because again, in working with survivors, that was something I realized when the person who's meant to protect you berates you, you have no trust or confidence left.
Yes.
So she's very, very close to her mom, very emotionally dependent on her mom, but she's unable to even tell her mom that this is what is going on because shame accompanies what happens behind doors.
Yes.
um, and then this is a woman who then goes on, and again, like going back to a conversation about people in our lives makes such a big difference, right? So the male protagonist, he's half Irish American and half Indian, and he becomes her partner in crime. And I say that like joking, like they are colleagues, they end up getting together, but like he's such good support, always rooting for her. And then she was in a marriage where the guy is like, you're worth nothing. So
Mhm.
when you are told day in and day out you're worth nothing, you start to believe that. And that's why
Yeah.
words are so important. People, no silence. Be
Mhm.
friends with silence if you have nothing nice to say. We all
Mhm.
have moments where we're feeling on the edge, but don't intentionally hurt people because words stay. They
Yes.
they sting you. They just don't leave you. My 3.5-year-old niece was saying something about like we were visiting them, and we were talking about summer. I was like, oh, and then you can wear shorts and we can go to the. She's like, no, shorts are for boys. And I'm like, where are she's not picking this up at home, it's in daycare. And I'm
Mhm.
like, somewhere some adult said this to her or a YouTube video, and now that's stuck with her. She refuses to wear shorts. She just Girls wear dresses, boys wear shorts. Clarity at 3.5. So
Yes.
it starts here and it goes to marriage, or when you teach, like what you say to your students stays with them. And we
Yes.
have to be mindful about the power of words. So
Yes. Yes. And there's a song, and I'm not going to be able to quote it so verbatim, but it's so easy to say kind words. Kind words are so easy to say, but they're seldom what comes out first in many of these situations. And one of the things that I go back to, and I'm well over it. I'm an artist and woodblock carver and many different things, but I had a kindergarten teacher tell me I couldn't draw. I was drawing the wrong way in kindergarten,
Oh,
and that has informed how I was with my own kids, how I taught, how I worked in all these different layers. It's something that has resonated through me to make a difference in the world instead of a limitation. But those words were to a 5-year-old, just like your niece, and
right.
whether it's modeled in your books or whether it's modeled in the world, you are doing it so beautifully, Sweta. I mean, you are
Thank
just.
you.
I wish we could have heard more of your written words, but I'm so glad just to have this conversation with you because your life is so complex with your creativity and your coaching and your wellness and mindfulness and everyththing. I think it ended up perfect.
Thank
It
you.
perfectly reflects all the things that you're doing, and all of the things that are very important. And as I said in one of my posts, I feel like I have so much to learn from you. And I feel like we all have so much that we can learn from you with the right open heart and mindset. And I'm just really grateful for your time this evening. Very,
Thank
very
you. And it was absolutely my pleasure. And thank you to everyone who is here. Like these conversations sustain us. So thank you. I had a great time. And yeah.
Let me open it up. Well, there's a few comments. Carmel's wonderful, and she was saying yes, truth about the violence within relationships. And Thomas, thank you for the lovely evening. But Robert was going to make an announcement. I think you're not mute. Robert's going to make an announcement about the anthology. And now, let me go over here.
Writing for Peace publishes an anthology twice a year. This year, the theme is Letters from the Self to the World. And I'll put the information on the chat here in a minute. And we would be flattered if you would submit something.
Don't be much for me.
Oh yeah, I was muted again. And I would absolutely, if Juniper, you can send me the link.
Yes, he's going to post it in
Okay.
in just a minute, and I can send it to you too if we're not able to.
Okay.
So no problem. And I'm
Okay.
going to unmute everybody. Some people had to leave. I know Tanya did and Thomas did, and there are a couple other people that did. But I'm going to unmute everybody or give you the ability to unmute yourselves. Now you do, so you can say hello, those of you that are still here. And oh, Tanya, you're still there.
Yes, I just had to put my video off because I have an eye condition and sometimes my eyes get sore. So it helps me to be more attentive by turning my video off. But thank you very much. Your wisdom on the writing process was spoke right to my heart, and you're just a bright and beautiful light in the world. And I just thank you for your presence.
Thank you so much, Tanya, for being here. It really means a lot.
Thank you, Tanya.
I was fascinated by the fact that you liked Jane Austen because women talk to each other so much in Jane Austen, and they almost create a consciousness about the society in which they live. And they don't always disagree with each other, but there's a kind of ongoing conversation about the world. And do you think that women can have that kind of conversation about the world that I think you found so inspiring in the novels that you read as a young person, today?
Oh, I would say absolutely. Look at the vice president of our country, right?
Yeah, but who's she
I'll
talking
leave it
to?
at that.
Who's she talking to? I mean, how many other women are there for her to be talking to? I mean, she's not in the house of of a wealthy family with sisters and friends and courting other people and weighing the balance of choosing suitors and so forth. I mean, those women are really kind of sorting out their lives.
But they
And
were like, sorry, go ahead.
no, that's the point I was making. You
And
know,
what I liked was the complexities.
we don't see her in the process of doing that. We don't see Kamala Harris in the process of doing that.
Mhm.
Okay.
I was wondering if you think women can do that now.
Well, I would say I want to say yes, and also the times have changed. When Jane Austen wrote the book, in that period, most women assumed this is the role that they were meant to play, and then we had Elizabeth, who was an exception. So in every book there was an exception. So she started to plant the seed that I read from about in the book. So
It's Carmel thanking everybody.
oh, you're most welcome, Karma. It was good to have you. Yeah, so why not?
Okay, sure.
I think that I think it may be taking place, and it may be taking place in social media. It's like I learned so much from Sweta. I have learned so much from Sweta through social media and following up on things that she's posted. And maybe not so much on the more intimate level, or deciding, suitors, or I'll just leave it at suitors. But I think that it is happening. Social media, through some of the essayists we have right now. We have some amazing essayists that are really pushing some of the different issues. And one of the older essays that I'm thinking about right now is Rebecca Solnit, and what men tell me, I think is what the title of it might be. And so, but I don't know that it's necessarily in a broader sense. It's more on an intimate level happening, and I wouldn't necessarily consider social media intimate, but I think that exchange that takes place, there are a couple of groups that I belong to through social media, smaller groups, where very, very intimate exchanges take place. Tanya is in one of those, and whether it's about health or self-image or relationships, it's really going in a deeper level. But is that where other people can see? No, because it's within a group within Facebook. It's like a private group.
And also common interests. So, like there might be a knitting club or a yoga club, or it could be something more cerebral, or it could be a women's leadership program. So the interest is also what builds this community.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a real good point. Yeah. Thank you, Phil. That was a very interesting question. Yeah. Stan, are you going to say hello?
Yeah, I have more to say, but I'll let you alone.
Thank you. Yeah, I have like an early start tomorrow. So I will reading. Yeah, I need to log off, but this was really nice to meet with everyone. And thank you again, Juniper, for creating this space. I really enjoyed meeting everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Thank you. I know you've had a really long day. Take good care, Sweta. Yes.
Thank you. You too. Stay safe.
Thank you for coming, everybody.